Well, hello. So in today's session, what we're going to discuss is, well, you decided that you love all those Salesforce videos and everything, and you've seen the product in the demos and everything, and then you want to implement Salesforce, but what are you going to do? Where are you going to start? I'm Talia. I work at Salesforce as a consultant, and I've been here for the last 6 months. And today I have my dear friend and dear colleague Rajeev here, who is our architects, one of our architects. Rajeev, what do you say about yourself?
This is Rajeev Agarwal, and I'm one of the architects in the firm, serving different clients from discovery until deployment. Where do we start, Talia?
Lovely. Okay, so I think let's begin with how do we plan and how do we prepare for such an implementation? What do you think from a technical point of view?
Very good point. I think just like any other implementation, an implementation success requires planning and preparation, and that requires understanding the needs of all the stakeholders involved. And why this is important is because if you don't understand that, you can definitely go overboard just because it is so easy to configure and code on the platform. And if you do that, it may impact the ROI, which is return on investment. Mm-hmm. So planning and preparation is very, very important. Now, how do you do that? Basically, you do that to make sure that you have realistic goals. And what do you mean by realistic goals? Realistic goals are like you have an overall goal for a project. You have an overall vision for a project, but instead of all the time focusing on the goal, you divide your goal into small chunks, basically, and works towards your overall vision of the project. So that's very, very important.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would like to say is that when you do that, you divide your goals into small chunks. Hence, you deliver small chunks frequent enough, stable enough, so that you can provide the end product basically in chunks to your end users, and they feel confident about your solution, and hence your adoption of the solution increases. So that's where I start, actually.
That's where you end, man. Literally delivered the entire project. Okay, yeah. Step back. Let's step back, roll back a little bit. Okay, so realistic goals makes perfect sense. Exactly. So how do we do realistic goals, right? So we're talking about the goals, so we're talking about the outcome. So we are deciding how we're gonna come up with a specific outcome at the end of the day. How about knowing what you're going to do, knowing your business processes, and at some point documenting your business, at least your prioritization. You have to make your prioritization correct so that you will be able to start from somewhere and then end up in the other on the other end. If only I can talk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very good point that you spoke about prioritization and documentation. Generally, if we talk about agile methodology, generally we use agile methodology for Salesforce implementations, and I have seen that in many projects, documentation is not given the required importance, and it's actually not good, because to me, documentation is the key to the success, basically. Not only in the initial phase of the project, but also once you go live, because once you go live, you need to hand over either to the client or to a maybe different firm who is taking over the managed services, or you yourself start managed services for that particular project. So documentation is definitely the key. And when you talk about requirements gathering, unless you document them absolutely clearly, document all the decisions that are being made, it's very difficult to track it. And if you're not able to track the requirements, then you will not be able to deliver as well. So it's very, very important.
Definitely. And to me, the only way you can actually come up with your requirements is to actually go through your own business processes, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you don't have your business processes correct from the beginning, from get-go, you will not have it correct as an implemented product at the end of the day. Because what implementation does is takes your business processes as is or in an optimized way and then puts it into computer world, puts it into an automation. So if your process, your current business process is already broken at some point, it's not going anywhere, then it will be exactly the same when we implement it. So having the business processes correct and set up from get-go is the way to drive requirements out of that and implement the best solution for the companies, right? And that is another topic even. So having the business optimization, business alignment workshop and all those things, they all help with the preparations to your implementation. It can be Salesforce, it can be anything else, but specific to Salesforce, it helps us to understand what sort of an automation you need. And at the end of the day, what sort of data will be running within those processes, within those automations, correct? And when it comes to data, it's a completely another story. What would you say about data?
But I can see that you are connecting the dots, Talia, which is very good. Data is very, very important because as like documentation, data is another area which is generally, I will not say in all the projects, but generally overlooked. And it kind of, people think that they can load the data whenever they want, which is actually not true. You really need to focus on your data because you need to make sure that your data is clean enough, ready to be loaded, basically. And when you are ready, then you should be able to load it without any issues as such. When you should load it, you should load your data once you are done with your setting up your system. In Salesforce word, once you're done with your sharing model, your sharing rules and role hierarchy, so that when you load your data, you can not only check the success of the data load as such from a data cleans perspective, but also from the perspective of whether the users are able to see the correct data, what they are supposed to see. So data is very, very important actually.
Yep, exactly. And data also defines what historic information that you have within your company. And it helps you with analysis of the data, right? Because one of the main reasons that we are implementing such systems like Salesforce, such powerful systems that hold all your information in a annual basis or whatever, and then come up to you with this Einstein kind of predictions and all those things and give you the analytics and helps you to come up with your strategies. That is the main idea why we're doing all these implementations. So if you have clean data, if you have a good quality data supporting your future implementation, then you will have more success than you have it the other way around.
Absolutely right. And I think the next point that we should talk about is our implementation approach, basically. In terms of implementing any particular solution, you largely have kind of two approaches generally followed. One is waterfall, which is more traditional, a sequential approach. The other one is Scrum, which is called the agile way of doing the implementation, basically. Fortunately enough, I have worked in projects following these two different implementation approaches. In terms of Salesforce, if we talk about Salesforce follows the Scrum, the agile way of doing the implementations. Even the Salesforce firm, when they do their thrice major releases in the year, they follow Scrum, the agile way of implementation approach. Why these approaches are important? Because even though ultimately you will deliver your end product, the implemented project, you will deliver it in slightly different manner when it comes to waterfall and Scrum. So in
Mhm.
waterfall, since it is kind of sequential, you do your design, your build and deployment planning largely once for the first very implementation. But in the agile way, in the Scrum agile way, you do it like iteratively, basically. So
Yeah.
so you decide for the first, there is a term called minimum viable product. You basically decide on the easy wins and the must haves for the very first implementation, and you do your design, your build and deploy for that very first phase of must haves, basically. And then you deploy, it becomes available to your end users, and you start working on the second kind of phase of must haves in parallel to your already live system. But when it comes to waterfall, you generally look for a longer period of projects, which takes like weeks and sometimes months in designing and developing and then deployment, basically. So the projects that I have worked on where waterfall methodology was used, the reason it was used because they were very used to using a waterfall methodology, even though they implemented Salesforce. But ultimately, what I have seen that all such clients, but slowly but surely, they moved from waterfall to agile.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
in that sense, I would argue that implementing agile really requires a certain set of skills at both ends,
yeah,
like
it does.
certain type of teams. So when we say agile, we're talking about, like you said, iterations, right? So everything's happening so fast. Yes, agile delivers bits and pieces of work very, very fast and very quickly so that you can start using your system as the second or third phase of the implementation still goes on, right? But for you to be able to do that, and for the team, the consultant team like us, to be able to deliver that, you need to have a certain knowledge of the product that you're using. You need to have a certain knowledge of your computer systems on top of what Salesforce does, right? This is more about really from a customer point of view. If you are getting ready to implement something in Salesforce and you haven't used Salesforce before, then that means you need to educate your people before you actually start an implementation. That will be the best way to do it. So along with the implementation, this always can be done along the implementation, yes, but if you start educating your people before the implementation, that will help you to be able to put realistic goals and to be able to know what you should expect from a product like Salesforce, because we're talking about a product that's already there, already in the market. So you need to know exactly what it can do and how it can help you, what ways it can be automated, and what ways it will be beneficial for your business and for your people from the usability perspective as well. So the only way to do it is to make sure that you have the right champions from your end, the right
Correct.
champions who are going to be advocates of the system within your company, because at the end of the day, if we're talking about switching or migrating into a product like Salesforce, you will need a change management system happening. So that means you're going to have your champions who will be able to further train or answer questions within the customer side as well. It's not only the consultants or the partners such as ourselves that's going to deliver the system, but also you guys yourselves will be within the system, running with the delivery team, so to speak, and in a collaboration that you will be able to test everything that's being pushed on your way from the implementers and then you will be able to give your feedback accordingly in a very timely manner so that it's all going to fit in this agile iteration, because otherwise it's not going to be agile, although we call it agile.
Yeah, good point. I believe you basically spoke about the team. So it's the right time to talk about having the right team as well, because it really depends on the size of the project, because for a smaller projects you may not need certain roles to begin with, but for the bigger projects you may definitely need a full size of the team. So I'm talking about, let's say you have a small project where you decided, which is generally the case and the best practice, that you are going to implement your first phase with clicks only, no code whatsoever. So for that very first phase, you don't require actually a developer, because you're doing the configuration work in that very first phase. Similarly, you may not require for such projects a full-time project manager, because a consultant kind of can play a project manager role for that particular project, because it's pretty small. But when it comes to large enterprises and large projects, you require kind of end-to-end full team, which involves, obviously, you need to have a sponsor, you need to have consultants, you need to have developers, you need to have architects, you need to have trainers, you need to have testers, you need to have scrum masters. So it's a full team. So it really depends on the kind of the size of the project we are going to deliver as such. And that is also closely related to when it comes to defining the project timeline also, because unless you have that team, you may not be able to gather the requirements completely. You may not be able to kind of estimate it correctly. So having the right team is also very, very important when it comes to defining the project timeline for a particular project. Yeah.
Cool. I think we literally filled out all the time that we had.
Okay. Good.
Well, it was lovely chatting about these things.
Yeah, same here.
Cool. So speak soon then in another topic,
Thank
in
you so
another
much.
coffee session.
For sure.
Cheers.